Ladies and gentlemen, let's honor the victims of the Katyń and Smolensk tragedies with 3 poems. The first poem, entitled Prayer for Them, by Polish poet Leszek Długosz, will be recited in French by Professor Maria Berwit-Gawalewicz and in English by Dorota Lipień.
Mesdames et messieurs, maintenant, nous allons commémorer des victimes des tragédies de Katyń et Smolensk en écoutant 3 poèmes. Prière pour eux, récitera professeur Maria Berwit-Gawalewicz et en anglais Madame Dorota Lipień.
Modlitwa za nich. Boże, daj siłę. Pozwól wierzyć, że ćwierć sekundy i mniej jeszcze wcześniej, choć o najmniejsze mgnienie, zdążył tam anioł miłosierny, Twój posłaniec. Osłonił ich swym skrzydłem, wyrwał, uniósł, przygarnął, zanim runęli. Bo nie umiera tu na ziemi duch sprawiedliwy, wola prawa, miłość czysta. Dla takiej wiary daj moc, Panie, że tam upadła w lesie katyńskim materia roztrzaskana tylko, a byli wzięci do arki Twego miłosierdzia. Są ocaleni. Istoko licha, lepianko człowiecza marna. Wierzysz, tak? Wierzę, Panie. Prière pour eux. Dieu, donne la force. Laisse-nous croire qu'en un quart de seconde, moins encore, plutôt en ces plus petits instants, ton ange de miséricorde arriva à temps. Ton messager le prit sous son aile, le tira et enleva avant qu'il ne s'écroule. Car sur cette terre ne meurt ni esprit juste, ni désir vertueux, ni amour absolu. Donne la force, le Seigneur, pour croire que dans la forêt de Katyń, la matière seule fut brisée. Ils furent pris dans ton arche de miséricorde. Ils sont sauvés. Misérable petite nature humaine, crois-tu cela? Je crois, Seigneur.
In memoriam. Grant us strength, O Lord. Help us believe that in a split second, maybe less, early at dawn, a brittle spark, angel of mercy landed in time, messenger of thy hope, raised them, sheltered before they crashed. Spirit of justice, will of righteousness, true love. With such faith, strengthen us, O Lord, that there, in the Katyń forest, only matter shattered, and they were led to the ark of your mercy, O Lord. They are saved. Frail being, feeble human body, Do you believe? Yes, Lord, you know that I believe.
Now we will listen to a poem entitled President Lech Kaczyński Enters Heaven by a Polish-Canadian poet from Toronto, Mr. Aleksander Rybczyński, who made the preparations to be with us today. Unfortunately, severe flu prevented him from coming. Jolanta Szaniawska will recite the poem.
Poème intitulé Président Lech Kaczyński entre aux cieux par Aleksander Rybczyński.
Prezydent Lech Kaczyński wkracza do nieba. Ojej. Doborowym dowodził oddziałem i wszyscy idą wyprostowani niebieską aleją. Jakby manewr odchodzimy, nie powiódł się. I nie było wybuchu, który miał zmienić ciało Polski w proch, a ich rozszarpać na kawałki, by nie było ani śladu, ani nadziei. Tak chciano ich ośmieszyć i każdą kroplę krwi zamienić w kroplę farby drukarskiej, niosącej kłamstwo za kłamstwem. Tak chciano ich ośmieszyć, z każdej nitki ich mundurów snuć odwieczną szatę zdrady, narzucać ją na usłużne plecy. Lecz statek ich powietrzny, rzucony na złom, na deszcz, na rdze, jak Feniks się zmienił, by w górę serca unosić niepokorne. A oni wkraczają teraz do nieba, dwaj prezydenci, generał Błasik, Anna Solidarność, Janusz Kurtyka, kapitan Protasiuk, admirał Karweta i pozostali równi w szarży bohaterstwem śmierci. W niebo wzięci, w blask ideałów, bo tylko wiara w nie czyni cuda. Gotowi przyklęknąć i pochylić głowy przed potęgą ofiary najwyższej, odznaczonej dziurą w nagiej, oblepionej, katyńską ziemią czaszce. Witają ich w milczeniu oddziały powstańców, podchorążowie Wysockiego, zwycięska kawaleria, polegli w potyczkach i dobici bagnetami. Kto służył ojczyźnie, odnajdzie ją w niebie. Nie widzą już smoleńskiej mgły, ani plugawego spektaklu umywania rąk, odznaczania zdrajców i stawiania pomników najeźdźcom, uginania karków i powszechnej hańby milczenia. Wkraczają teraz do nieba i śpiewają im aniołowie, tak piękni i młodzi jak stewardesy, które wytrwały przy nich do końca. Wkraczają do nieba i witaj Chrystus przejmuje stery, ofiarowuje im Polskę.
We would like to welcome Aneta Nowakowska, who will sing an epic song written by Jacek Kaczmarski and entitled The Walls.
Accueillons Aneta Nowakowska qui nous chantera une composition épique écrite par Jacek Kaczmarski, Les Murs.
Natchniony i młody był, ich nie policzyłby nikt. On im pieśnią dodawał sił, śpiewał, że blisko już świt. Świec tysiące palili mu, z nad podnosił się dym. Śpiewał, że czas wyrunął. Oni śpiewali wraz z nim, wyrwij mu zęby krat, zerwij kajdany, połam bat, a mury runą, runą, runą i pogrzebią stary świat. Wyrwij murą zęby krat, zerwij kajdany, połam bat, a mury runą, runą, runą i pogrzebią stary świat. Wkrótce na pamięć znali pieśń i sama melodia bez słów niosła ze sobą starą treść, dreszcze na wskroś serc i głów. Śpiewali, więc klaskali w rytm, jak wystrzał poklask ich brzmiał i ciążył łańcuch, zwlekał świt. On wciąż śpiewał i grał. Wyrwij mu zęby krat, zerwij kajdany, połam bat, a mury runą, runą, runą i pogrzebią stary świat. Wyrwij mu zęby krat, zerwij kajdany, połam bat, a mury runą, runą, runą i pogrzebią stary świat. Aż zobaczyli, ilu ich poczuli siłę i czas i z pieśnią, że już blisko świt, szli ulicami miast. Zwalali pomniki i rwali Bóg. Ten z nami, ten przeciw nam. Kto sam, ten nasz najgorszy wróg. Śpiewak także był sam, patrzył na rytm tłumów marsz, milczał wsłuchany w kroków puk, a mury rosły, 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 łańcuch kołysał się u nóg. Patrzy na równy tłumów marsz, milczy wsłuchany w kroków huk, a mury rosną, 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 łańcuch kołysze się u nóg.
I would like to move to the next part of our event and briefly outline why we have gathered here today.
I was just told that there's more friends, who just came from Montreal, and I'm supposed to greet them. So, guys from Montreal, les Montréalais, bienvenue!
Bienvenue! Nous sommes ici. We have gathered here because we want the truth about the Smolensk crash. 2 years after the crash, we know that the so-called investigation into the Smolensk crash conducted by the Russian government, by the technical committee called the Interstate Aviation Committee, is false and invalid. In fact, this period of the last 2 years is marked by the horrific and scandalous tale of criminal activities, of the destruction, manipulations, and falsification of the evidence committed by the Russian government. We know that instead of the investigation into the crash and instead of securing the crash scene right after the crash, Russians began destroying the wreckage and changing the landscape of the crash site. There is a video made on the second day after the crash. Link to this video you will find in our leaflets. This video shows Russian workers chainsawing the wreckage, cutting and ripping out electrical cables, breaking windows with a crowbar. This is of the significance as the windows hold the pressure, which can be measured and prove if there was an explosion or not. And that was the reason why they were being destroyed. This video also shows how the wreckage is carelessly moved using bulldozers, literally dumped on the tarmac of the Smolensk Severny airport. The wreckage was kept there for several months, unprotected, under open sky, and allowed to degenerate further. What was the norm at Smolensk is a stark contrast to how the evidence was handled and how the crash site was secured after other known plane crashes, such as the plane crash in Lockerbie and the Swiss Air crash in Peggy's Cove. The procedure used to investigate these two crashes was a careful, painstaking attention to every little detail of evidence in conformance with international standards and methodologies. In Smolensk, we see the opposite. We see methodological, planned, and strategically orchestrated destruction of the evidence and the destruction of the crash site. We know that Russians manipulated and tampered with the key evidence. Parts of the aircraft went missing. The plane debris were relocated within the crash site. Witness testimonies were changed. Readings from the black boxes and other onboard instrumentations, such as the terrain awareness and warning system, in short, TAWS, were altered. In fact, all 4 copies of the black box recordings that the Russian side provided to Poland were tampered with. Polish side had to request 4 times the copy, as each one that Russians provided was tampered with. Horrific is also the fact that months after the crash, crowds tramping the muddy grounds of the crash site were still finding fragments of the plane and human remains in the soil. A list of criminal acts committed by Russians in the so-called investigation is too long to mention during the short time we have today. For those who are interested in learning more about the extent of destruction and falsifying of the evidence from the crash, I refer you to the website smolensk.eu, smolenskrash.eu, which also is listed on our leaflets. This website contains important documents presented to the European Parliament last month, which challenges the validity of the Russian government investigation, and de facto the Polish government is the investigation, which is a mere rubber stamped copy of the Russian final report. I want to mention another horrible act committed by Russians: the fact that the rescue operation was never conducted. All passengers were pronounced dead on the crash scene in less than 1 hour. And medical rescue crews, which arrived at the site, were sent away. They've never examined the bodies. Were there any survivors? The fact that the crash was from a low altitude and at a low landing speed makes it highly probable that there might have been survivors. This is based on the experience from the similar type of crashes. Right after the crash, it was communicated that there were 3 survivors. This information was later denied. However, there is a mysterious video on YouTube which was taken within 5 minutes from the crash with a mobile phone by the first-hand witness. The authenticity of this video has been confirmed. On this video, we hear unidentified people and the Russian soldiers running in the background, and we also hear 4 gunshots. Is it possible that the survivors were killed? These serious allegations have not been disproven to this day. On the contrary, initial explanations that these shots were coming from the handguns of the Polish security officers, which allegedly exploded as a result of fire, was invalidated, as all bullets were accounted for. This video is available on the internet and also at the website smolenskcrash.eu. Another gruesome fact of the criminal actions committed by Russians is the way the bodies of the victims were treated, which violated the dignity of the victims and traumatized their families. Russians conducted only one full autopsy, that of the President Lech Kaczyński. The other victims were only superficially examined, and the post-mortem reports were produced. The bodies of the victims were returned to Poland in sealed caskets, and families were not allowed to open them, receiving an explanation that we have to obey the Russians' law. It took 18 months for the families of the victims to fight the Polish authorities to allow exhumation and autopsies of the bodies of 3 victims. Only 3 victims out of 96. 18 months. The autopsies revealed that the bodies were profane. They were stuffed with the garbage. The autopsies also revealed that the Russians' post-mortem reports were faked to the extent that 90% of the data completely differed from the facts. For example, one post-mortem report included internal organs that had been surgically removed from one victim's body long before the crash. Another report stated that the victim was 20 centimeters taller and that one victim was of good physical stature, where in fact the victim had traits of Heine-Medina disorder. Also, the alleged cause of death reported by Russians did not correspond with the condition of the bodies. Furthermore, the families of the victims were denied the right to have autopsies of their loved ones performed by independent experts. The renowned forensic pathologist, Dr. Michael Baden, who was the chair of the committee reinvestigating the John F. Kennedy's assassination, was flown to Poland at the request of the families to perform autopsies of the 2 victims. Polish authorities did not allow Dr. Michael Baden neither to perform autopsies nor to be present during the autopsies. Until this day, the families of the victims continue to fight the system to allow for exhumation and autopsies of their loved ones, which is unprecedented case and a violation of human rights. When one hears the account of the extent of the criminal activities committed by the Russians, one undoubtedly wants to ask, all right, this is what Russian side did to you Poles. What about your own government? What was their reaction? And here lies the tragedy of the Polish people And this shows the political reality in Poland. The reality that the present government, the government of the Premier Donald Tusk and President Bronisław Komorowski, does not represent Poland's national interest. After the crash, the political power in Poland was consolidated in the hands of Donald Tusk and President Bronisław Komorowski. Their political interests align with those of the Russians and aim at tightening the Russian control over Poland. This government betrayed national interest of Poland. Donald Tusk entrusted investigation into the Smolensk crash in its entirety into Russian hands. This was done at the direct orders of the Premier of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin. Donald Tusk's government in Poland also agreed to leave in Russian hands the key evidence from the crash. The wreckage of the plane, black boxes, important electronic devices such as cell phones, lab computers, memory cards and important documents which contained Poland and NATO classified information. This government also turned a blind eye on Russians' criminal actions of destroying and falsifying the evidence. In fact, Donald Tusk's government has been collaborating with Russians all the way in this regard. Premier Donald Tusk also rejected offers of assistance with the investigation from NATO, European Union, and the United States. Although direct responsibility for the crash falls on the Russian government, the government of Donald Tusk is also responsible directly for the crash, as these government officials were responsible for ensuring the safety and security of the state flight. Donald Tusk and his officials are also responsible for years of the media campaign of lies and misinformation of the public. Polish people were assured that Polish experts were participating in the autopsies of the victim bodies, in the examination of the crash site, and that they had access to the evidence and to the documentation produced by the Russians. In fact, this alleged collaboration was a fiction. It has never taken place. There were no Poles participating in the victims' autopsies. There were no Poles investigating the wreckage and the site of the crash. And Poles had no access to the evidence and no access to documentation produced by the Russian side.